Here is Immortal Moments for explanation. Friends, like videos and subscribes to our channel. Martial Universe Season 10 Part 59 Explanation. So let's start our explanation. When they saw a large group returning to Dao sect, it naturally stirred quite a commotion. Those disciples from Dao sect looked at the gloomy and dispirited disciples from Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace, before they sighed quietly. This war had affected the entire Eastern Xian region. If it was not because their Dao sect had Ying Huan and Lin Dong's timely return, it was likely that their fate would be even more miserable than those Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace disciples. Within the main hall of Dao sect, Ying Xuanzi released a deep sigh after he heard about what happened to Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace. His expression was a gloomy and dispirited one. Other than Yuan Gate, only our Dao sect still stands in the Eastern Xian region. I believe that there is no way that they will let us off. Ying Xuanzi said. Sect Master, there is no need to be overly worried. Although Nine Heavens Supreme Purity Palace suffered a great loss this time around, Yuan Gate also paid a hefty price. In fact, many of their elders were killed. Furthermore, even with the Yimo secretly helping them, it is impossible for them to simply brush off such a significant loss. Lin Dong shook his head and continued, currently, Yuan Gate might have lost the ability to launch an attack. Moreover, those three great heads of Yuan Gate are extremely cunning. Therefore, it is likely that they will not make a move at this moment. So, do you mean? A glint flashed across Ying Xuanzi's eyes. Take the initiative to attack and obliterate Yuan Gate. Let's end the chaos in the Eastern Xian region once and for all. A fearsome glint flashed across Lin Dong's eyes. However, he spoke in an extremely calm voice. Ying Xuanzi and the various elders of Dao sect were all startled upon hearing this. Currently, Yuan Gate was extremely powerful and most people would rather hide from them and protect themselves. However, Lin Dong was even more ruthless than them, as he actually wanted to take the initiative to attack Yuan Gate. Father, although Yuan Gate is powerful, our Dao sect is no pushover. There is no telling who will emerge victorious in an actual fight. Ying Huan also spoke at this moment. Moreover, the Yimo are extremely cunning. Hence, there is no telling what could happen if we allow Yuan Gate to drag this on. Lin Dong nodded. It was likely that Devil Prison were the ones supporting Yuan Gate. Moreover, it was clear that they were plotting to pull off a massive scheme. Therefore, they did not dare to show themselves and decided to use Yuan Gate as a proxy. Hence, if they did not destroy Yuan Gate as soon as possible, it might be difficult for them to nip the problem in the bud. Elder Ying Xuanzi. Yuan Gate might no longer be the strongest faction in the Eastern Xian region after this defeat. Ling Qingshu, who was quietly listening, suddenly remarked in a soft voice. Oh! Ying Xuanzi was startled. Then, he turned to look at Ling Qingshu. The war that Yuan Gate started affected the entire Eastern Xian region, and many super sects were destroyed. However, although those super sects were destroyed, not everyone within was killed. In fact, many powerful individuals managed to escape. Therefore, if Dao sect takes the initiative and pledge to exterminate Yuan Gate, I believe that countless powerful hidden individuals would swarm over. At that time, the situation would be reversed and Yuan Gate will end up falling into a disadvantage. Ling Qingshu's cool voice resounded through the hall, causing the eyes of many to brighten abruptly. Lin Dong also glanced at Ling Qingshu in surprise. What she proposed was indeed quite ruthless, and it directly addressed the heart of the problem. By taking advantage of the hatred that Yuan Gate had created, they would be able to gather all the hidden experts and band them together to fight against Yuan Gate. After which, Yuan Gate would be forced to fight a life and death battle with the entire Eastern Xian region. Lin Dong, what do you think? A glint flashed across Ying Xuanzi's eyes. Meanwhile, there was an unconcealable excited glow on his face. Lin Dong smiled and nodded. All right. Ying Xuanzi suddenly stood up. Currently, he looked somewhat agitated. After all, over the last year, his Dao sect was pushed by Yuan Gate until they could barely catch their breath. However, was the situation finally about to reverse? Spread the news and invite all the powerful practitioners within the Eastern Xian region to form a Yuan Destruction Alliance. 3 days later, we will band together and fight to the death with Yuan Gate. News regarding the Yuan Destruction Alliance quickly spread across the entire Eastern Xian region. Although there was little activity initially, the entire region quickly boiled after the news was confirmed. Following which, countless experts hidden in different parts of the Eastern Xian region rose and hurried towards Dao sect. Meanwhile, these powerful practitioners all had the same expression, that was hatred towards Yuan Gate. The sky of the Eastern Xian region became incomparably lively within a short 2 to 3 days. Countless figures streaked across the sky and headed straight for Dao sect. A vengeful aura stealthily enveloped the entire Eastern Xian region. Yuan Gate. Currently, this sect no longer had the grand and majestic aura that it had before. Instead, black demonic aura enveloped the interior of the sect, while dark chilly winds blew continuously. Those Yuan Gate disciples shuttling within the sect absorbed the demonic aura, and they had intoxicated and fearsome expressions. This sect looked just like a demonic region. In the deepest part of Yuan Gate, 3 figures were standing above a deep mountain stream with their hands behind their back. Meanwhile, an extremely frightening aura slowly spread from within their bodies. I heard that Dao sect is organizing a Yuan Destruction Alliance to fight with us to the death. One of the 3 figures suddenly laughed softly before he said, "In that case, let's wait for them to come. Once we destroy that alliance, no one in the Eastern Xian region will be able to oppose us. At that time, our Yuan Gate shall become the only overlord." Standing in the middle, a white-robed man said. His eyes were black and white in color, and it looked as though yin and yang were suspended in them, giving him an incomparably mysterious look. This person was precisely Qian Yuanzi. I exchanged blows with Lin Dong before. I never expected him to become so powerful after 3 years. How interesting. Beside him, a silver-haired Ren Yuanzi smiled indifferently and said, "We were able to kill him easily 3 years ago. It will be the same 3 years later. The final result will not change." Qian Yuanzi said in a faint voice. Ren Yuanzi smiled and nodded. Then, he waved his sleeve before a silver light shot out from his hand and headed into the deep mountain stream below. I am still unable to fully utilize this ancestral symbol. After all, it doesn't belong to me. How unfortunate. That silver light shot into the deep stream. Meanwhile, black fog was drifting at the deepest part of the stream, and there seemed to be a blurry figure seated like a statue at that spot. That silver light flashed before it shot into that figure's body. Qian Yuanzi looked at the blurry figure at the deepest part of the mountain stream. With a strange expression, he muttered, "Yuan Destruction Alliance. Ha ha, come, come. Dao sect, I will give all of you a present that you guys would have never imagined." Within merely 3 days, the atmosphere within the Eastern Xian region unknowingly began to change in various mysterious ways. Those experts, who had been hiding from the experts of Yuan Gate, began to leave their hiding places. After which, they headed towards Dao sect, the only other super sect left on the Eastern Xian region besides Yuan Gate. The commotion and effectiveness of the Yuan Destruction Alliance had far exceeded the expectations of Ying Xuanz's group. Hence, they were a little stunned when they saw the number of experts flooding towards their Dao sect. Ultimately, it seems like they had underestimated the hatred created by Yuan Gate in the Eastern Xian region. The mountains outside Dao sect were packed with humans. A noisy din gathered together and shot towards the clouds, causing this spacious mountain range to become as noisy as a bustling marketplace. Furthermore, there were still light figures occasionally streaking across the sky. Meanwhile, many of them had powerful auras. Clearly, all of them had one thing in common, as their eyes were all filled with intense hatred. Their sects were destroyed, their martial brothers were killed, and they were forced to live like fugitives. Every single one of these occurrences was sufficient for them to become sworn enemies of Yuan Gate. Buzz. As more and more powerful practitioners headed over, the Dao sect guarding formation began to tremble. Finally, the light barrier slowly scattered. Following which, vast and powerful Yuan power fluctuations spread like floodwaters. Swoosh swoosh. Countless figures rushed out in all directions. Finally, they hovered in the sky. Their agglomerated aura was vast and mighty. Meanwhile, every Dao sect disciple was wearing a confident expression even though they knew how powerful their opponents were going to be. When those experts, who had originated from the other vanquished super sects, saw these Dao sect disciples, all of them sighed secretly. Compared to Dao sect, the disciples from their super sects were indeed a little lacking. It's no wonder Dao sect was the only super sect in Eastern Xian region who was able to survive repeated invasions from Yuan Gate. Bang! A monstrous ferocious aura suddenly soared towards the sky while everyone was sighing emotionally. The intensity of that aura caused countless powerful experts to be stunned. They quickly lifted their heads and saw a black cloud rushing out from within Dao sect. Subsequently, a group of men stood in the sky and did not move at all. In fact, they were breathing as though they were a single entity. Meanwhile, their intense and brutal aura seemingly transformed into a 10,000 feet large tiger above them, and it looked exceptionally fearsome. Those powerful experts all had a drastic change in their expressions when they saw this formidable army. Promptly, fear flashed across their eyes. Clearly, they realized just how powerful this army was. Is this army from Dao sect? Why haven't I heard about it before? It is rumored that this army was brought back to Dao sect by Lin Dong and they are extremely powerful. Lin Dong? Could it be that Dao sect disciple who was forced to leave the Eastern Xian region 3 years ago? Who else could it be? However, unlike back then, he is no longer an unknown little kid. 3 days ago, the first elder of Yuan Gate led an army to attack Nine Heaven's Supreme Purity Palace, and Lin Dong hurried over to reinforce the latter. In the end, none of those old bastards from Yuan Gate managed to escape. He's so powerful? Dao sect is truly blessed. Back then, they had Zhou Tong. Now, they got Lin Dong. Truly. The reason why Dao sect dares to attack Yuan Gate is largely because Lin Dong has returned. Moreover, he even brought back a group of extremely frightening helpers. This time around, those 3 bastards from Yuan Gate have finally met their match. Many private conversations suddenly erupted after that ferocious group showed up. Following which, many people's eyes were filled with surprise and curiosity. Clearly, within a few days' time, Lin Dong's name, which was once famed across the entire Eastern Xian region, was unearthed again. Swoosh! After the tiger-devouring army appeared, many rays of light subsequently shot out from behind. After which, they stood in the sky. They were Ying Xuanzi, Lin Dong, First Elder Zhu Li and the rest. The din in this place died down immediately after Ying Xuanzi showed up. Everyone, I believe that we are not strangers. My Dao sect would like to express our sympathy towards the painful experiences that all of you have been through over the past year. However, in the past, our Dao sect could barely protect ourselves and we were unable to lend a helping hand. Therefore, I hope that everyone will not bear a grudge because of this. Ying Xuanzi surveyed the mountain range before he cupped his hands together. Then, his low cry resounded across this mountain range. Sect Master Ying Xuanzi is too polite. All of us were far too short-sighted. Against such a calamity, if we had joined forces in time, we would not have landed in this state. At a short distance away, a large group of men were standing in the sky. Leading that group was a withered and skinny green-cloaked old man, with a large green sword on his back. Meanwhile, extremely sharp sword auras were being emitted by him. At this moment, there was a bitter expression on that elder's face. Sigh, Sect Master Mo. Ying Xuanzi looked at that green-cloaked old man and sighed. Who is he? Lin Dong glanced at that green-cloaked old man. The latter was extremely powerful and it was obvious that he was an ultimate expert who had stepped into the samsara stage. Moreover, the sword aura circling him was quite formidable. Clearly, he was no ordinary individual. He is the sect master of Blade Sect, Mo Jian. However, as of now, Blade Sect has already disappeared and I'm afraid that they are all that is left. Standing beside him, Ying Huan softly replied. There are also sect master and elders from other vanquished super sects. They managed to escape from Yuan Gate, but they did not dare to show themselves until now. Standing on the left of Lindong, Ling Qingzhu surveyed this sea of people before she spoke in a somewhat ethereal and pleasing voice. It's all thanks to you. If we can band them together, we will have a much higher chance of defeating Yuan Gate. Lindong gave a heartfelt praise. If their Dao sect was to fight to the death with Yuan Gate alone, it was likely that they would end up with a Pyrrhic victory even if they could succeed. This is also because you led us to a huge victory 3 days ago. Otherwise, these people would not dare to show themselves. In fact, they would rather leave the Eastern Xian region than to oppose Yuan Gate. Ling Qingzhu shook her head and said, if we do not properly organize this group of people, I'm afraid that this Yuan Destruction Alliance might only end up becoming a burden. Ying Huanhuan said in a faint voice. Miss Huanhuan is right. These people are indeed powerful. However, if their strength cannot be controlled, it would only end up becoming a burden. Ling Qingzhu glanced at Ying Huanhuan and nodded. Lindong nodded as well. After which, he exchanged glances with Ying Xuanzi before he slowly stepped forward. Every pair of eyes swiftly turned towards him the moment he did so. In fact, a small uproar vaguely erupted. It was likely that all of them recognized him. Friends from the Eastern Xian region, I believe that all of you know why we have invited you guys here. The war started by Yuan Gate has impacted the entire Eastern Xian region. Many super sects were destroyed and their members were killed. It's likely that everyone here shares the same attitude that Dao sect holds towards Yuan Gate. Lindong looked around him, before a stern expression flashed across his eyes. That aura caused even the sect master of Blade Sect, Mo Jian, to feel secretly startled. Then, Lindong's deep voice reverberated across the sky. However, everyone should also know how powerful Yuan Gate is. Hence, there is only one way to get rid of this cancer. That is to band together and combine our forces. Our Dao sect has sworn that we will never coexist with Yuan Gate. Today, our Dao sect will leave our base and fight to the death with Yuan Gate. If anyone shares the same desire, our Dao sect will naturally regard you as an ally. However, if anyone secretly creates obstructions and affect my Dao sect's desire to destroy Yuan Gate, I, Lindong, will regard that person as a member of Yuan Gate. Rumble. A fearsome glint suddenly flashed across Lindong's eyes after his voice sounded. Following which, monstrous purple-gold light swept forward, before thousands of purple-gold dragon symbols appeared. Then, they directly transformed into a massive tens of thousands feet large purple-gold dragon claw. After which, that claw swung forward, before the land collapsed immediately, leaving a deep gully that stretched on for 100,000 feet. Moreover, it even directly split a mountain into two, and it was an extremely terrifying sight. A loud sound rumbled continuously across the sky, while dust spread on the ground. Countless experts below were staring at Lindong, who now looked like a battle deity filled with a frightening and ferocious aura. Immediately, shock surged into their eyes, while cold sweat dripped down from their foreheads. Compared to Ying Xuanzi, this young man acted in a much more fearsome and formidable manner. Roar! A monstrous tiger roar followed, as the tiger-devouring army roared towards the sky. Immediately, dense ferocity covered the sky and blotted out the sun, causing Lindong to look even more menacing. The entire sky gradually became silent. Even those formidable former sect master and elders from various super sects were intimidated by Lindong. As such, none of them dared to speak up. When Ling Qingzhu looked at Lindong, who managed to intimidate countless experts from the Eastern Xian region with a single sentence, a faint arc slowly lifted on the corner of her lips. Who could have imagined that this man, who was a tender and weak youth many years ago, would grow by such an extent? In fact, it was not an exaggeration to claim that the current Lindong was the #1 individual in the entire Eastern Xian region. Young brother Lindong is right. Yuan Gate destroyed our sect and we are arch-enemies with them. Our goals are all aligned. Hence, there is no way we will pose any obstructions. If anyone here dares to do so, I think that none of us will let him off. Sect Master Mo from Blade Sect gradually recovered his senses. Meanwhile, the fear in his eyes retreated as he cupped his hands together and laughed. Sect Master Mo is right. As long as we can destroy Yuan Gate, our great desolate palace will follow young brother Lin Dong's every command. At a short distance away, an extremely skinny old man also cried out in a deep voice. This person was the sect master of Great Desolate Palace, and he was also a well-known expert in the Eastern Xian region. After the two of them spoke up, many cries of agreement followed. Instantly, the emotions of countless individuals surged, before their hatred towards Yuan Gate converged together. Ying Xuanzi watched this sea of people in front of him, who were now completely stirred up, before he quietly sighed in relief. After which, he turned to look at Lin Dong, before a tinge of satisfaction flashed across his eyes. Thank you, sect masters. Lin Dong cupped his hands together towards the two sect masters. After which, he slowly withdrew his monstrous brutal aura before he said, since everyone shares the same goal, the Yuan Destruction Alliance will thus be formed. Everyone can decide to leave or stay after this matter is resolved. And now? Lin Dong's voice paused, before his eyes looked afar. Then, his eyes swept across the sea of people scattered across the mountain range. All of their eyes were filled with hatred towards Yuan Gate. Lin Dong slowly lifted his hand. In the next instant, rich murderous intent surged into his eyes. Let's go. Today, we shall destroy Yuan Gate. Roar! Earth-shaking roars resounded across the sky and the mountains began to tremble. After which, Yuan power surged before countless people rushed forward. After which, a monstrous torrent swept across the sky. The decisive battle with Yuan Gate had finally arrived. 100 miles from Yuan Gate. Hundreds of Yuan Gate disciples were gathered on a mountain top. This was a guard post in front of Yuan Gate, and it was used to monitor every activity around the Yuan Gate vicinity. Of course, such a guard post did not exist in the past. After all, Yuan Gate were the ones on the attack and no one dared to attack them. Of course, this was all in the past. The current situation in the Eastern Xian region had undergone a drastic transformation within merely 3 days. This startling transformation was even detected by various empires which allied themselves with Yuan Gate. Hence, some of the wiser ones quickly withdrew their forces and stationed them within their own empires. In fact, they no longer dared to attack the other empires. After all, they were keenly aware that if Yuan Gate was defeated, even though it was impossible to wipe out all the empires allied with Yuan Gate, it was likely that the most vicious ones would still be destroyed. Therefore, amidst this unstable situation, it was best to act a little more prudently and keep a low profile. On that mountain top, those patrols were continuously scanning their surroundings with their sharp eyes. Occasionally, there would be some people scuttling around and checking on other places. What is that? Time passed by. Suddenly, someone let out an exclamation. The people around him immediately lifted their heads to take a look, only to realize that the distant sky seemed to have become much brighter suddenly. Meanwhile, there seemed to be countless individuals within that distant light. Oh no! Send the signal! The patrol's expressions changed drastically while horror surged into their eyes. Immediately, a sharp screech was emitted from their lips. Swoosh! A fiery red light shot out from within their hands before it finally burst in the sky. In fact, it was possible to spot it even from 100 miles away. After the signal was released, that light quickly swept over from the horizon. Only then did they finally see the large number of humans within that light. Meanwhile, those people were all staring at them viciously with intense hatred in their eyes. Swoosh swoosh! Without any unnecessary words, countless attacks rained down from the sky. Instantly, the entire mountain peak was flattened by their wild and violent attacks. The mountain peak was flattened. However, the figures scattered all across the sky did not stop. Instead, they headed straight towards the distant Yuan Gate. Soon after, in a few other locations, brilliant signal flares shot into the sky. Following which, those signal flares were all engulfed by the figures swarming over from behind. The flames of vengeance came from all directions, surrounding Yuan Gate and allowing nothing to escape. The headquarters of Yuan Gate. Demonic aura lingered over the entire place. Meanwhile, it felt as though there were sharp ghost howls being emitted. At this moment, Yuan Gate was in chaos and countless figures were scuttling around. After which, they lifted their heads to look at that seemingly endless sea of people rushing over from afar. It was virtually impossible to tell just how many people were coming. Even though the eyes of these disciples were entwined with demonic aura, a trace of fear still flashed across their faces. Charge! Countless individuals were now standing in the sky outside Yuan Gate. When they saw those Yuan Gate disciples, their eyes turned blood red immediately. Then, with a roar, tens of thousands of them charged straight towards Yuan Gate with red eyes. Humph, you are all courting death. An icy cold cry sounded from within Yuan Gate just as that group was about to attack. Soon after, a tens of thousands of feet large black cloth suddenly shot forth and swept across the place. After which, the bodies of everyone who came into contact with it were immediately corroded until only their bones were left. In fact, they did not even have the time to scream before they fell from the sky. After experiencing such a fearsome obstacle, those red-eyed individuals were all stunned as they backed off. After they recovered some of their senses, they quickly retreated. Then, they stared at Yuan Gate with fear in their eyes. After what happened to those reckless individuals, the light figures behind them finally calmed down and they no longer dared to randomly charge forward. All of them stood in the sky, while they stared venomously at the tightly guarded Yuan Gate. Suddenly, a commotion erupted amongst the light figures covering the sky. After which, a huge crack was formed before a large group from Dao sect appeared. Their leader was naturally Lin Dong, Ying Xuanzi and the rest. The surrounding experts all felt uplifted after this group arrived. Meanwhile, there was an additional trace of anger in their eyes when they looked at Yuan Gate. Lin Dong was standing in the sky. When he saw the demonic aura covering Yuan Gate, he involuntarily shook his head. He did not expect that what was once the most powerful sect in the Eastern Xian region had now become a demonic region. The three old dogs of Yuan Gate. Are you guys going to keep hiding even up till now? Lin Dong looked at the deepest part of Yuan Gate in an indifferent manner. Then, his voice, which was wrapped with majestic Yuan power, rumbled across the sky like thunder. Outrageous. All of you actually dare to attack our Yuan Gate. You are all courting death. An elder of Yuan Gate cried out sternly. Do you think that you are qualified to speak here? Liu Qing glared at that elder. Suddenly, he widened his mouth before a dragon roar swept forward. The intense dragon might within the roar shattered the space and ruthlessly charged towards that Yuan Gate elder. However, a black light suddenly flashed from the deepest part of the sect just as that dragon roar was about to break into Yuan Gate. Soon after, it shattered that dragon roar. Ha ha, you are quite capable indeed. You even managed to get experts from the dragon tribe to assist you. 3 black lights shot out from the deepest part of Yuan Gate after the dragon roar was shattered. After which, they appeared in the sky. The person on the right had fair baby-like skin and silver hair. The one on the left wore a black robe and had clear smooth skin. However, his hands were exceptionally pale. Meanwhile, there was a man wearing white robes standing between them. The color of his eyes was a mixture of black and white, appearing just like yin and yang. Moreover, they looked so deep that one would feel as though one was falling within. Their demeanor was exactly the same as 3 years ago. Therefore, who else could they be other than the 3 great heads of Yuan Gate? Lin Dong's eyes paused on the 3 of them. Meanwhile, there was extremely rich murderous desire surging within his eyes. After all, he had been looking forward to this day ever since he was chased out of the Eastern Xian region 3 years ago. In order to prepare for this day, he had lingered between life and death many times over the last 3 years. Huff. Lin Dong let out a deep breath. His aura also gradually changed as he exhaled. If he was like a sheathed sword in the past, as of now, this sword was completely unsheathed. His sharp aura seemingly penetrated the clouds. Little Martin and Little Flame also slowly clenched their hands. Meanwhile, there was endless ferocity flashing in their eyes. Standing within Yuan Gate, the Qian Yuanzi trio also detected Lin Dong's transformation. Immediately, their pupils hardened slightly before the expression on their faces grew a little solemn. Regardless, they had no choice but to admit that the current Lin Dong was no longer that puny Dao sect disciple from 3 years ago. Back then, I should have spared no expense to kill you. Qian Yuanzi sighed. Don't tell me that you actually held back at that time. Lin Dong smiled. Meanwhile, his tone was full of ridicule. Back then, the three great heads of Yuan Gate had attacked together in order to deal with him, a mere disciple of Dao sect. If Qingji had not penetrated through space and rescued him, it might have been impossible for him to escape. Qian Yuanzi narrowed his eyes, before a cold glint flashed across his eyes. Then, he casually said, there is no need to be so proud of yourself. You might have escaped back then, but it will be the same after we finish you off now. Perhaps you three old dogs will be the unlucky ones this time around. Lin Dong softly said. Arrogant creature. Do you think that you are the only one who has improved after 3 years? I shall let you witness the enormous gap between the both of us. Ren Yuan's face darkened. Then, his body moved before the empty space fluctuated. Finally, he appeared directly in front of Lin Dong and extended his large hand. Meanwhile, an exceptionally dense reincarnation ripple spread. Reincarnation stage. Beside him, First Elder Zhu Li and the rest were all startled when they detected this ripple. They were just about to intervene when Lin Dong stopped them. Then, he waved his hand before a black shadow shot out from his sleeve. After which, it transformed into a black figure in front of him. That black figure was holding onto a black long blade. Meanwhile, he stared indifferently at Ren Yuanzi, who was heading towards him with a hand containing a reincarnation ripple. Finally, without any hesitation, that black figure swung his black long blade forward. Swoosh! There were no frightening fluctuations when that black long blade swung forward. However, Ren Yuan's eyes suddenly shrunk. That was because he felt an extremely dangerous sensation within his heart. Kai? While he was feeling uneasy, that black long blade flashed before it heavily slashed onto his palm. After which, that incomparably mysterious reincarnation ripple was actually slashed apart by that black long blade. Finally, that blade pierced his flesh, causing fresh blood to splurt. Ah! Ren Yuanzi cried out miserably. Promptly, he quickly pulled back. The space itself became distorted before he quickly retreated back into Yuan Gate. Finally, his eyes looked at the black figure in front of Lin Dong with some fear lingering in them. Be careful. There is something strange about that creature. Qian Yuanzi stared at the black figure in front of Lin Dong and slowly said. Ren Yuanzi clenched his teeth. Immediately, green and white flashed across his face. After all, he did not expect Lin Dong to serve him such a humiliating blow right after he attacked. This little fellow came prepared. Yuanzi, who had yet to speak, suddenly said in a dark and cold voice. Came prepared her. Qian Yuanzi smiled faintly and said, in that case, we should deliver our surprise too. He gently swung his sleeve after his voice sounded. Following which, the space around him quickly became distorted. Then, black fog surged and there seemed to be a blurry figure slowly walking out from within the distorted space. This commotion was naturally discovered by Lin Dong's group. Immediately, they frowned gently. This was because it was possible for them to detect an extremely strange ripple from that distorted space. Shosho. A foot slowly stepped out from within that distorted space. After which, the black fog entwined around him gradually faded, revealing a skinny figure. That figure was wearing a black robe and his entire body was shrouded in darkness. Since so many people from Dao sect are here, all of you should meet an old friend. The expression on Qian Yuan's face became even more insidious as he smilingly said to the members of Dao sect. Pale hands were extended from deep within that figure's sleeves. After which, that figure slowly removed his hood in front of countless pairs of eyes. After he removed his hood, a handsome yet pale face appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Who is it? Lin Dong looked at that foreign figure, only to be slightly startled. Though this person was clearly a stranger, Lin Dong detected a familiar scent from his body. A commotion suddenly erupted from behind. Lin Dong turned his head only to see that Ying Xuan's face had suddenly turned pale. The latter pointed his finger at that figure while disbelief filled his eyes. You. Zhou Tong, you are still alive? How is this possible? Zhou Tong. Lin Dong's heart trembled violently. Then, he stared in bewilderment at that figure. It turns out that man was actually the most dazzling Tao sect disciple 100 years ago, someone who even comprehended the Great Desolation scripture. Zhou Tong. Didn't he die at the hands of Yuan Gate? Zhou Tong. A commotion that could not be restrained suddenly erupted amongst the disciples of Tao sect. Their faces were pale as they looked at the figure in the distance. Meanwhile, disbelief filled their eyes. How is this possible? Ying Xiaoxiao also exclaimed in shock. She clenched her hand and muttered, Senior Zhou Tong was clearly killed by Yuan Gate 100 years ago. How is it possible that he is still alive? Beside her, Ying Xuanzi trembled continuously. Meanwhile, the expression in his eyes were changing rapidly. Clearly, the emotions in his heart were far too intense. It seems like the current scene had a huge impact on him. When Lin Dong looked at the disciples from Tao sect, who had burst into an uproar, he frowned slightly. Promptly, a somewhat solemn expression appeared in his eyes. 100 years ago, the position that Zhou Tong enjoyed amongst the disciples of Tao sect was approximately the same as his current position. In fact, when Lin Dong first entered Tao sect, he even regarded Senior Zhou Tong as his target deep within his heart. Along the way, he broke many records set by Zhou Tong and gradually made a name for himself in Tao sect. This was because he did not wish for there to be an obstacle in his training journey that he could not surpass. Every generation would have its own legend. Clearly, 100 years ago, Zhou Tong was the legend in Tao sect. This person had also comprehended that extremely profound Great Desolation scripture and led the disciples of Tao sect to fight against Yuan Gate during the Great Sect competition. Finally, he even charged up to Yuan Gate alone. Although he was eventually killed, he left a significant mark on the Eastern Xian region and his name was forever imprinted in the hearts of all the Tao sect disciples. However, as of now, this former legend of Tao sect had once again appeared alive in front of them. Moreover, he was now on the opposing side of their Tao sect. At this moment, it felt as though their faith had crumbled, as the originally spirited Tao sect disciples were all beginning to feel disheartened. He is indeed Martial Senior Zhou Tong. Beside him, Ying Huan slowly said. Her pretty icy blue eyes stared intently at the distant figure, with a complicated emotion in her eyes. Previously, she was also an ardent fan of Martial Senior Zhou Tong. Zhou Tong? You are still alive? Ying Xuanzi stared intently at that familiar figure. Meanwhile, his voice was trembling slightly. Ha ha, what a moving scene. Ying Xuanzi, this is the disciple whom you were the proudest of, a legend in the hearts of countless Tao sect disciples. However, as of now, he is siding with my Yuan Gate. Don't you think this is comical? Qian Yuanzi laughed faintly and said. Why? Ying Xuanzi's body trembled as he cried out sternly. Zhou Tong's lips moved upon hearing that explosive cry. However, he did not utter a single word. You traitor! Ying Xuanzi's demeanor seemed to have become a lot older at this moment. Beside him, Ying Xiaoxiao hurriedly supported him. Meanwhile, the Tao sect disciples behind, who were originally raring to go, were all dumbstruck when they saw this scene. Lin Dong involuntarily frowned when he saw this unexpected scene. His sharp eyes stared intently at Zhou Tong. A moment later, he slowly said, Martial Senior Zhou Tong, I believe that the current you is no longer the real you, am I right? Zhou Tong's body seemed to have stilled for a moment. After which, his eyes turned towards Lin Dong. Though he did not speak, there seemed to be a ripple deep within his eyes. It doesn't matter why you have become like this. We, the disciples of Tao sect, will never forget the Martial Senior Zhou Tong who dared to charge up to Yuan Gate all by himself for the sake of Tao sect. Moreover, I believe that you are definitely not acting out of your own volition. Lin Dong's somewhat hoarse voice slowly spread, gradually suppressing the chaos amongst the Tao sect disciples. Immediately, many disciples began to regain their composure. After all, given Martial Senior Zhou Tong's character, how was it possible for him to stand on the side of Yuan Gate? There was definitely something amiss. Zhou Tong continued to stare at Lin Dong. A long while later, a gentle breeze blew over, causing his long hair to drift. After which, tears began to fall on his handsome face, while his body shook violently. It looked as though he was struggling against something. After which, an extremely hoarse and indistinct voice was emitted from his mouth. Share. Ying Xuanzi's body stiffened. He looked at the struggling Zhou Tong before he came to a sudden realization. With a fearsome expression, he stared at Tian Yuanzi and roared, "What have you done to him?" There was endless despair within his hoarse voice. Tian Yuanzi frowned as he glanced at Zhou Tong. Then, he snorted coldly before he shook his sleeve. After which, Zhou Tong's struggling body slowly stilled. The emotions that had just rose on his face gradually faded away and he looked just like a zombie that was being controlled by someone else. Your disciple has an exceptionally tough mind. Even after he was eroded for 100 years, he is still able to retain a trace of consciousness. Actually I didn't do much. It's just that I was unwilling to see such a good seedling go to waste. Therefore, I decided to change his allegiance from Dao sect to my Yuan gate. Tian Yuanzi laughed. Ying Xuanzi was outraged and even his face became distorted. Never did he imagine that this disciple, whom he was the proudest of and whom he viewed as his own son, was actually being tortured by Yuan gate for the past 100 years. I will murder you. Ying Xuanzi suddenly roared, before vast and mighty Yuan power erupted. Then, he directly shot forward before incomparably sharp attack smashed towards Tian Yuanzi with lightning-like speed. Tian Yuanzi smirked upon seeing this. Then, he said, "Zhou Tong, your teacher can no longer control himself. Why don't you, his disciple, teach him how to behave himself?" Swoosh! Zhou Tong shot forward after that voice sounded. Then, he directly appeared in front of Ying Xuanzi in a phantom-like manner. Swiping his hand, the space in front of him became greatly distorted. In fact, it seemed like the formless space had solidified under his palm. Bang! Ying Xuanzi's sharp attacks heavily clashed against that distorted solidified space. Then, he was actually sent flying. Soon after, Zhou Tong took a step forward, before his body strangely appeared in front of Ying Xuanzi. Following which, he pressed his finger forward before the tip of his finger seemingly penetrated through space and directly pressed towards Ying Xuanzi's forehead. His technique was extremely ruthless. Father! Ying Xiaoxiao and the rest behind had a drastic change in their expressions when they saw that Ying Xuanzi was in danger after merely 2 bouts. Kai? That finger, which contained a silver glow, looked just like a sharp sword. However, just as this sharp attack was about to land on Ying Xuanzi's forehead, a vast and mighty mental energy suddenly agglomerated into a curtain of light on his forehead. Although this mental energy-like curtain only blocked that attack for an instant, just as that finger was about to break through the curtain, another long finger with a black glow also rushed over from behind. After which, it clashed heavily against Zhou Tong's attack. Creak creak! The 2 glowing fingers clashed. Shockingly, no overly violent energy assault waves spread. However, the space around those fingers seemed to have collapsed at this moment. Bam! 2 figures trembled before they both took over a dozen steps back. I see, so the spatial ancestral symbol is in your hands. Lin Dong glanced at Zhou Tong in surprise after he rescued Ying Xuanzi. When they clashed previously, Zhou Tong had made use of the strength of the spatial ancestral symbol. Moreover, this strength was even more powerful compared to what Ren Yuanzi used a couple of days ago. Clearly, the spatial ancestral symbol did not belong to Ren Yuanzi. Instead, it belonged to Zhou Tong. Zhou Tong did not reply. His eyes merely looked at Ying Xuanzi, who now looked much older. Meanwhile, there seemed to be pain and bitterness which could not be described with words, hidden deep within his eyes. Sect Master, the current Zhou Tong is already under their control. Lin Dong sighed softly and said. Ying Xuanzi clenched his hands tightly. A long while later, he slowly nodded. With a hoary expression, he said, I was too reckless. When Lin Dong saw Ying Xuanzi's demeanor, he felt upset as well. Promptly, he quickly lifted his head and cast his cold and stern eyes towards the Tian Yuanzi trio before he said, Sect Master, you can be rest assured that I will make them pay a hefty price. I will leave everything to you. Ying Xuanzi nodded. He also understood that he was unable to handle the situation with his current strength. Ha ha, unless you finish off Zhou Tong, I'm afraid that he would not allow you guys to attack my Yuan gate. Chen Yuanzi laughed in a faint voice. There are so many experts from the Eastern Xian region present today. It looks like we will all get to enjoy a huge internal fight within Dao sect. Old dog, you can be rest assured that you will suffer a fate worse than death once I capture you. Lin Dong gave Chen Yuanzi a ferocious smile. His eyes were cold and stern. Is that so? A murderous intent flashed across Chen Yuanzi's eyes. Soon after, he waved his sleeve and said, Zhou Tong, this is Lin Dong, the one who succeeded your reputation in Dao sect. Amongst your past accomplishments, none of them managed to surpass his. Today, let him witness your abilities. Of course, it's best if you can kill him as well. However, Zhou Tong did not move when he heard Chen Yuanzi's words. Instead, a faint silver glow crazily flickered within his eyes. Humph, are you still thinking of resisting now? You must be dreaming. Chen Yuanzi snorted coldly upon seeing this. He clenched his hand before a greyish aura covered Zhou Tong's eyes, swiftly eroding the silver light within. Zhou Tong's body trembled violently and his head was quickly filled with perspiration. He clenched his teeth before blood seeped out, causing him to look exceptionally fearsome. You old dog! A furious glint flashed across Lin Dong's eyes when he saw that Chen Yuanzi had forced Zhou Tong into such a state. His body moved and he was just about to attack when the space in front of him became distorted. Then, Zhou Tong appeared and stopped him. The grey aura wildly eroded the silver glint in Zhou Tong's eyes. Lin Dong could feel that the remaining consciousness in the latter was being rapidly erased. Lin, Marshal Jr. Lin Dong. Zhou Tong widened his mouth as the silver glint in his eyes made its final struggle. His hoarse and indistinct voice contained a pleading tone. Please promise me, you must kill me. Lin Dong looked at Zhou Tong, who was once the pride of their entire Dao sect. When he saw that he was being tortured so terribly, fury erupted within his heart before murderous desire crazily surged within his black eyes. A moment later, he inhaled a deep breath and slowly clenched his hand. His low voice was filled with brutal murderous desire as it resounded across the sky. Marshal Senior Zhou Tong, you can be rest assured that I will make those 3 old dogs pay for all the pain that they have given you. Thank you. A pleased smile appeared on Zhou Tong's face. After which, the silver glint within his eyes also disappeared completely. This episode ends here.